Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Grow Your Life podcast, where we talk about things that can help you grow in your life and in your business, because I believe that if you grow in your life, it'll help you in your business. If you grow in business, you make more money, you can do more, accomplish more, expand your reach, your influence, your territory, all of that. And in this podcast, we have practical tips every single week that you can apply. Also, every single day, I go live on my social media, Facebook and Instagram, with 10 to 20 minutes of just straight up content to help you get your mind right, and even some tips and strategies for your business on there. So today, what I wanted to talk to you about is this: how to start a podcast. The beginner's guide to starting a podcast. And here's the deal. I'm on episode number 11 here. I don't claim to be a podcasting expert or anything like that. I haven't done like 500 episodes. A lot of people, they do, at least 100 episodes before they do a course or something on podcasting. This isn't intended to be a course, but what it's intended to do is, after doing about 10 episodes, I've learned a little bit about what works, what doesn't, and I can help you at least get started with the very basics of getting started with a podcast. There's a ton of great resources out there for podcasting and growing in podcasting, so I suggest you look those up on Google, on YouTube, and stuff like that. In the future, maybe I might do a masterclass on podcasting. I'm still learning this myself by experience. But for the very beginner that doesn't even know where to start, that's what I'm going to help you with, because I do know at least what does work a little bit and what doesn't. Now, there's two different types of podcasts. One of the first things that I want to tell people when they're first starting a podcast is I highly recommend you listen to a bunch of podcasts. That's your very first step before starting a podcast. Is number one, listen. And I'm going to put this on the whiteboard. If you're on the YouTube version, you can actually watch it, where I'm writing this down and I'm putting these little notes on the whiteboard for you to kind of help solidify what I'm saying. Listen to podcasts. So the idea is you have to get in the game and off the sidelines before you can start doing anything. And so for me, my very first step before I started doing a podcast is I spent a couple months listening to hundreds of podcasts, listening to how they were produced, how they started, how they ended, what worked and what didn't. And so that's the first step for you. Is I really want to invite you to do that. Now, if you don't know how to do that, I actually wrote a blog post this past week on how listening to podcasts has changed my life. And it really has. Not just because it inspired me to make my own podcast, but also the things that I've learned have completely transformed my life. And that's why I started this Grow Your Life podcast, is to distill my knowledge and information down for people. Podcasting allows you to take hundreds of hours of information and learn from some of the best and brightest minds and mentors on the planet, and distill that information down to 30 minutes or an hour. What might have taken you hundreds of hours of learning just to accomplish what they share. And so in that, I shared some of my favorite ways of doing that: looking up keywords, looking up certain people that I look up to. I even search for people in business like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, stuff about Steve Jobs, Peter Thiel, these startup entrepreneurs, these billionaires that have just completely transformed our world that we live in. I want to hear either interviews from them or about their mindset and thoughts, and people breaking down that information. And so also maybe stuff about copywriting, about podcasting, about fear, shame, confidence, guilt, whatever stuff that we're trying to get over. If you're feeling overwhelmed, look up certain words and keywords in Spotify, Apple Music, which Apple is getting rid of iTunes now, so it's Apple Music or Apple Podcast app maybe is what it is. And Google and Stitcher, those are some of the top ones. And you can go to my website and really just kind of look at that, of the different ones that I go on. I actually checked out Gary Vee's podcast to see kind of how he did his, and that really helped inspire just a little bit of the format of the technical side of things. Now, this is going to help get you started. I wanted to start and preface this by there's really two different types of podcasts. There's two major types of podcasts out there. One of them is either you're talking to an audience, like I'm doing here, where it's like a show, it's a class, or it's a something like that. It's talking directly to the audience, one person, and this is probably the easiest for most people to get started with. It's what I've started to do. The other format that is just really popular, and I highly recommend it as you grow, and if you can do this even just out the gates. A lot of people don't start a podcast until they get to this place. I don't think that's the wisest thing to do, but it's interview style, where you bring in industry leaders to talk about a topic that maybe you're not an expert in, but they're an expert in, and you bring their expertise onto your platform and distill it for your audience. That's one of the highest quality, best ways of doing a podcast, and it's more like a radio show. And in that, I'm going to have some more interviews with people. I have a number of people that I want to talk to and ask about that. I'm starting to kind of grow the format and help develop that for you guys. But also myself, I have a lot of knowledge, experience, been doing this over the years for a long time. Just a little bit of background for me. I started in my business career doing audio visual production. And so doing a podcast, recording and videoed is kind of like riding a bike to me. It's one of the easiest things in the world that I can do. And then I have experience and knowledge that I've learned over the years, and also learned how to teach people as well. So in that, I've learned kind of that this isn't about me, this is about you. So that's what I wanted to kind of just preface that with a little bit. For those who are starting out, if you don't have like a big list of people to interview, you could either bring in a co-host, and you guys could start to talk together and collaborate together with a co-host. And this is why I said listen to a number of podcasts. This circles right back around to point number one here. Listening to a number of different podcasts is going to give you a firsthand experience of the different formats of podcasts that work. And pay attention to the podcast episodes that you really like, that really gripped you, that really did really well, in some of the top podcasts. I listen to a variety. I listen to, I'm just going to be real open here, Joe Rogan. There's a lot of, there's cussing and swear words in that one, but it's just, he interviews like some big name person, celebrity. His background was from he was UFC fighting. He was on Fear Factor, television, all of that. So now he did his podcast with his wide Rolodex of people that he knows. I mean, he interviewed Elon Musk on there, just top people, and it's really, they're just having a conversation, and it's just his is like a 4-hour just a conversation. Buddy of mine, a guy I work with over at Christ for the Nations, his name is Josh Cassidy. He actually started doing his podcast. It's a similar style to that, but it's more from a perspective of a Christian perspective, which is not, Joe Rogan is definitely not from that. It's very more liberal. It's more liberal, but he has a lot of respect for conservatives. So that's one of the cool things I like about that. Another podcast is Ed Milet. Now his format is a little more similar to mine, but he does both styles, where he'll do a talk on one episode, and then he'll do an interview, and he'll alternate between the two. So one episode is just him talking, another one is an interview, and then back and forth, and he'll go between that format. I really like that. Another podcast that's really great, I'm just going to give you my list of some of the favorite podcasts here, is Jenna Kutcher, the Gold Digger podcast. Her format is probably the most similar to mine that I'm doing here, just because we're also in kind of a similar industry, similar style of how we do things. She has more of a female audience. Rachel Hollis is another great person. She's an author, speaker, just business leader. One style of podcasting that I don't like, but it does work if you're very famous and popular already, is taking the best content that you already have from other places and making it a podcast episode. I would not recommend this for most people. And I say this because it's better to have your podcast be content that people can't get anywhere else. But in that, Tony Robbins' podcast, Gary Vaynerchuk's, Ty Lopez, a lot of those podcast episodes are distilled from some of their other content that they have. And maybe if you're making a lot of content, you're talking a lot, you can make notes and you have a team that marks down the start to finish. That's a great podcast episode right there. And so you could distill content that you're already creating elsewhere into a podcast, but you have to do that very strategically to where the episodes can stand alone on a specific topic. I've seen people try to do this, and it fails miserably if you don't do it strategically. And so one of my favorite alternate ways of doing that is, let's say you spoke on one topic here, you distill it specifically for your podcast audience on a podcast, record it at least once a week. And so this is kind of the basics of podcasting. Listen to podcasts. It's going to help you understand how to do podcasts, the best way to do them, the best format, and you're going to find a groove that you really like, that you really connect with in doing this. And so the next part of that is the technical side of podcasting. Actually, before we do that, is what to say. What to say. And if you don't know what to say in a podcast, let me pull this up here on my computer because I don't want to reference you to the wrong episode on this. I actually did a podcast episode on this that I want you to go back to and listen to because it's really going to help you in this. And it was podcast episode number, I think it was 5 or 6. Episode number 6. So the Grow Your Life podcast, episode number 6, is about how to go from a beginner to expert at video content creation and video marketing. And in this, however, I don't want you to write it off because of the title. For those of you who are podcasting, if you have not listened to that specific episode of this podcast and you want to create a podcast, that is a supporting episode to this one that I would say is actually a mandatory listen for you. If you're going to make a podcast, go also listen after you listen to this one to episode number 6. And what I break down in that is this: how to know what to say when you're recording. I talk specifically about video, about social media, because of this. If you don't know what to say, you can start here with your social media, doing live videos and video recordings on your social media, and you'll start to see, and you'll come into a cadence that will then lead into a podcast. And that's what I did. That's how I started doing it. I spent a month and a half, almost 2 months, doing just every single day videos on my Facebook, on my Instagram, Facebook Lives, to really hone in my content. And then out of that, I discovered what people wanted me to talk about, the highest value that people wanted me to talk about. The reason I'm recording this podcast right here is I had 3 people ask me, are you going to talk about how to make a podcast? So now I'm producing content that people have asked for out of the feedback from my previous content that I've made on my social media. And so go listen to that podcast right there. It specifically gives you a formula for coming up with what to say, how to say it, what people want to hear from you. And if you are clueless as to what to talk about, this episode will help you with that. I cannot stress that enough. I break down the process of coming up with what to say out of thin air, basically. And that's why the specific words of that are important is that podcast episode is how to go from beginner to expert at video content creation, but it's really content creation in general. Video and audio doesn't matter. And video marketing and video content creation. And so in that episode, it's on my website, it's on the podcast, episode number 6. You have to listen to that. It specifically gives you a formula and a blueprint for coming up with what to say, what people want to hear from you, and becoming an expert at content creation. by practice, by really osmosis, by doing the process. And so if you're not doing live videos, if you're not talking on video, if you haven't talked live before, if you haven't shared, if you haven't distilled content in front of people, if you haven't publicly spoken, this is the best place to start, because it is a sandbox, a place to get your feet wet to do that. And I would suggest you spending at least a month following what I teach on that, and then start your podcast. It will accelerate you at least 12 months in the process of podcasting just by doing that for a month. So you're going to save yourself 12 months of headaches by doing 1 month of what I teach in that episode. That's a little plug for that episode. So, I can't stress that enough for you guys. If you want to even pause this episode and then go back and listen to that and then come back, you can even do that. So in that's going to teach you how to talk about what you should talk about. Now, from that, what I do is I start to hone into, what do people always ask me to talk about? What do I have knowledge in? Or what is a movement that I want to create? And this is where I started with the what of my podcast. So the what of my podcast, the what of your podcast, has to start here. You have to have an ideation process and come and spend some time. I actually spent for this podcast about 3-4 months coming up with the what of this podcast, the what. You don't have to spend that long with it. The reason I did was out of my own fear, my own worry that people wouldn't want to listen to me, that I would say the wrong things, that I would do the wrong things. And as soon as I got past that fear, I had a breakthrough and was able to come up with that what. And if you're dealing with fear or worry about that type of a thing, episode number 5 of the podcast helps you with that. It's called How to Deal with Any Type of Fear in Your Life and Unlock Your Breakthrough. And it's specifically about breaking that shame, fear, control cycle, and having more confidence in what you talk about and what you do and what you're called to do. And so that's really going to help you as well, if that's something that you struggle with too. In this is episode number 5 on that, episode number 6 on what to talk about, a starting place, and we'll start to create this idea in your head. You'll start to create what I call, it's in the cloud. We have this cloud in our brains. The cloud is this area where we come up with ideas. We come up with our best ideas. And a lot of times we can sit there, we can spend so much time thinking in the cloud about the ideas, about the what, but it never really starts to materialize until we start to do it. We start to actually take action. And so in that, I noticed people want information from me about how to grow their life, how to make money, how to close sales, how to do Facebook ads, how to make video content, how to make content on social media, how to mobilize people, how to do stuff like that. And so that's where I started to then start to craft my video content based on what people were saying. The comments that I was getting back from people were based on that. And so my initial what that I came up with, actually the name of this podcast, the original name was it was going to be called the Idea Builders Podcast. Because I used to hear so often from people, there's no lack of good ideas. The hard part is building. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to help people go from idea to production and create anything in their life. And then I realized, oh, you know what? I want to help people grow a business. And then I was like, wait a sec. I want to help them grow their life in general. And that's where the Grow Your Life name came from. So it's not just life, it's business and life. And that's what we talk about. And if you listen to this podcast, you know that. It's about life and business. That's why my intro is that. I actually got that intro from a guy named Andy Frisella. He said that on his podcast. It's a little more of a harsher podcast. It's called the MF CEO Project, which I don't want to say the words of what that is, but this is a PG rated podcast, even a G rated. I try to keep it. So his is definitely more of mature content, but I was inspired by him saying that, life and business, you can apply things to both. And that's exactly what this podcast is as well, in my own way. And so, Andy, if you're listening to this, you inspired me. I stole that little line from you, but it applies perfectly to what I'm doing. So, and I appreciate that as well. So in the what, I came up with idea builders. I wanted to help people, and then it expanded in that. I started to talk about how people could go from idea to creation and build things on my social media. I realized people wanted to learn how to sell things, how to get more customers, how to make videos, and how to get past their fears and breakthrough. And that's where a lot of my episodes are starting to build that baseline. I'm starting to kind of build a house. And so for my podcast episodes, I'm building this foundation here. Right now, we're actually still on this foundation. We're right here. Up here is, where I start to teach people and distill content of running a multi-million-dollar business. We haven't really gotten there yet. And this is about building, about growing and all that. Right now, we're still at the baseline of doing that. But I have a long-term vision to help people get to this place where I want, if people listen to my podcast episodes, if they watch my content on social media, my big goal is to help an unlimited amount of people, 100,000 people, make $1 million. I know that what it takes to make $1 million is not as hard as people have been sold in their life. It's not as hard as what we've been sold by the media, what we've been sold by school, what we've been sold in life. And I believe that if you make choices and decisions and you stay consistent with it, anybody that's listening to this can make $1 million. If you're especially listening to this episode about making a podcast, you've gotten 20 minutes into this, I believe that you have inside of you the desire to be a millionaire, to be somebody who influences, to use money, resources to influence the world around you. That's why I've done 2 podcast episodes about why you need to make more money and how to make more money, just to help people get that mindset going. And so this episode's not really a plug for all my podcasts. It's not what it was intended to be. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to break down for you kind of my process of how I went from coming up with this big idea of making a podcast, and then how we've gotten to episode number 11, and how you can essentially do the same. And so if you continue to listen to this podcast, I can guarantee you that by the end of this, you're going to know exactly what you need to do to get started to do a podcast. For many of you, it's just listening to episode number 6, and even episode number 5, and maybe episode number 1, where I talk about limitless possibilities. And so stick with me now for the next, I'd say it's probably going to be about another 40 minutes where I'm going to break down this process for you of that. So once you find your what, you find what your goal is. What's your big, hairy, audacious goal? What's your big goal for business? What's your big goal for your life? And if you don't know what that is, that's what I've talked about on these episodes. I did a live the other day about how to find your destiny and calling if you don't know what it is, how to get past overwhelm. That's what I talk about on my Instagram and Facebook. I need to stop plugging all my content, but I really want you guys to stay plugged into what I'm talking about, because I'm building this really like a free school for you guys of how to grow your life and build a business, and how to have your mindset wrapped around that, to be a doer, a creator, a builder. And so in that, creating a podcast is building something. It's building something great. And so you have to decide, what's your format? Listen to podcasts, decide on what format you like, which one you can excel at. So that's one of the other best things is this. I want to circle back around here. So by listening to other podcasts, pay attention to the format that they're doing, whether it's interview style, whether it's storytelling, whether it's teaching, and discover which style you could really excel at. And from that, I don't want you to do something that you can't excel at. So for me, I excel. If you've listened to me, I excel at teaching. I excel at distilling how to go from step 1 to 5. It's one of my probably greatest strengths, is helping break that down for people and walk them down a path of that easily. I do take a long time to do it. I know that. And I'm working at being less wordy at that, going off on bunny trails. But in that, learning what you can distill, what you can be the best in the world at as a podcast. And your goal of having a podcast is, how can you become a leader in your industry in what you're talking about? Don't just do a podcast for the sake of, because it looks like it's a good thing to do. You really need to make a decision that I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the best in the world at this. Another thing too is also to realize you don't always have to do just one podcast. I've actually considered starting a tech-based podcast in the future that's just around technology, maybe stuff that people on my Grow Your Life one don't always want to hear in that stream once I'm in that realm more of. Maybe even distilling more marketing stuff into something like that. But to start, I would suggest just one podcast. So in that, you start making content on your social media. You learn what format you can excel at, what people want to hear from you about or from your guests. So you'll discover if you're not maybe the expert that can share it, or you don't feel that confidence initially, you can interview people that are confident, that are great at that. And there's an energy that goes back and forth by having that interview style. And you hone in on what your what is, your big idea for your business, for your life that you're going after, your goal. And then you figure out, okay, what's a podcast that can support that? And so for me, this podcast supports my big goal. My big goal, personally, is to just make as much money as I possibly can to make the world a better place and impact the world and leave a legacy. And to take that money to help people, to help feed the poor, those that are in need, stuff like that. And so, but in that, I need to make money. And how am I going to do that? One of the best ways I know how is to help teach other people how to do what I know how to do, and then roll that into other businesses, maybe product manufacturing. I want to manufacture products, create software, stuff like that. Those are my big goals. And so the Grow Your Life podcast was the very first baseline for me to start with that, and helping people understand that because of my experience in the personal development industry in doing media. Now, that's the what of what to talk about. I think we've really nailed that one down right there. So you'll want to get really clear on that. If you don't know what that is, spend some time thinking about that. But then eventually comes a time for you to take action. You see, a big idea, a what, never goes anywhere without action. And we have to make decisions. We have to finally decide. And I want to encourage you to not spend more than 60 days in this. Don't spend more than 60 days in the what to say, the what I want to talk about, the listening to podcasts, the learning what to say. So don't spend more than 60 days in that. If you're spending more than 60 days, you're overthinking it. You've already probably talked yourself out of it enough times. And if you've already started on this process, it's time for you to get started. If you already know what your what is, you've already been doing this, it's time for you to go to step number 2 and take action. And so to take action, what do? How do we take action? How do we get started? There's a couple of resources out there. Anchor is one of them. And let me get the domain name right on this. Anchor is one of the best. Anchor.fm is a platform for free for you to start and make a podcast for free. Anybody can use it to start their podcast. And it's free. And it's amazing. And it's not what I use personally. But I know a lot of people that have, and it's super valuable. They have an app. You can record it either on an app on your phone. So your phone can actually become your podcasting device. And all you do is you just record and you just start talking. And you start to do that. And they have a resource. They have a great little video on their homepage here that I'm looking at that you can watch. And then you can start to build your episode out from there. And they'll then help you distribute it to platforms like, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, all of those different platforms. Google Play, things like that, and they have lots of statistics for you in that. So Anchor is a really great resource for that. Another one it's paid is Podbean. For most people, I think Anchor is really going to be a great place to start. Now, a little sidebar to that, I do a format that would be a combination of Anchor plus YouTube. So what I'm doing is that I'm actually recording my content on my computer, and I'm using a microphone and a webcam, and I'm recording it. That way people can even watch when I'm using a whiteboard like I am now. They can watch me on YouTube. They can subscribe to the YouTube. They can access it on that platform, plus all the podcasting platforms. So when people go to their favorite podcasting platform and they look up Grow Your Life, they can do that. I also combined a hashtag with my title. So the title of my podcast is the Grow Your Life Podcast. The words are separated out. But I'm also utilizing hashtag Grow Your Life. And I'm putting that in the titles of my episodes. So we'll get to that here in a second about titles and coming up with that. For you to start recording initially, Anchor is a great resource because it's kind of an all-in-one studio for you to where you can just record your audio, come up with that. If you want to create some artwork for your podcast cover, Canva.com. It's not Canvas, it's Canva. Canva.com is a graphics design website. It's free, super powerful. It's basically like Photoshop on the web, and it'll help you create a beautiful cover art. If you're building it around yourself as a personality, I would suggest at least getting a photo, maybe from the waist up, of you standing and smiling, and then you could cut that out and use it as part of your cover and put some text on there. Or you can, use a little photo of yourself in a corner and put your title on there and build that in Canva. And then you can use Canva to create little graphics when you do each episode each week. So from there, you'll come up with your title. Once you have your title, once you know your topic, we're going to start taking action. We're going to build out our artwork in Canva. And we're either going to start recording on Anchor, or we'll use Anchor to distribute. If you want to do video, which, to be honest, I recommend also having a video version. Not everybody has to do that. I like it because I can record a video. I can record an episode with my phone, set it up with a tripod on my phone. And on my website, I'm actually going to link to my favorite resources for tools for recording video. And so what I use is I actually use this. It's the Yeti USB microphone. It's $100 on Amazon. I have that plugged into my computer. I have the Logitech webcam up here that I'm using for my camera. Or you can use your phone, and you don't even need this microphone. You can actually just use your phone on a little tripod like this. So this is a tabletop tripod, or you can get a large tripod if you want to stand up and use a whiteboard. And it has a little clip for my phone that goes right here. And I clip the phone to it. And there it is. And now my phone becomes a camera, and it can record me that way. And then that can become my YouTube version, and then you can extract the audio from that to upload it to Anchor, to upload it to Podbean or Squarespace. So I'm actually using Squarespace for my podcast because my website's built in Squarespace, and so I also use Squarespace for my hosting. They have a limit of 100 episodes on Squarespace, so I'm going to probably keep using it until I max that out, or until I decide to just host it through another platform. But I like to keep things easy. A lot of people overcomplicate the process of podcasting. So once you discover what you want to talk about, now we got to get into the technical side of it. To simplify it really easily, everybody can use their cell phone. You can either record it on video or just use Anchor to record the audio and then upload the audio, use their website to drag and drop your artwork that you develop in Canva, and then it'll distribute it out. Now from there, one of the things that you want to do is the what to talk about. I would spend a little bit of time coming up with maybe what your first 3 episodes are, and I would personally record three episodes ahead of time. 3 episodes ahead of time. And what I actually found out is I think some of the platforms actually need 3 episodes to submit a brand new podcast. And so by recording 3 episodes, come up with what those 3 are. So I did all of those at once when I launched my podcast. I recorded how to create possibilities for your future, how to sell anything, and how to build a high quality website, which ties into my course that's coming out here on Squarespace. And so in those 3 episodes, then the way I came out with the titles is copy. So I would talk about a topic. I may not have had the title initially, but then what I think about at the end is, okay, what did I talk about? How do I distill that down to 1 sentence? And that becomes my title. Now, a lot of people wonder, so on the podcasting platforms, they pull from your title, and what people search for pulls from the title exactly as you've written it. So what I like to do for the title, as I was writing out completely episode number 1, and I actually got rid of episode, and I noticed a lot of people, they just put 1 and then either a dot or a colon, and then you put how to make more money, how to do that. And then what I did was at the end of it, I didn't make it so long that I couldn't. I also tied it into a hashtag. So I have the Grow Your Life podcast, and I came up with that name specifically because I could have a hashtag of the exact same name. And the hashtag is a big part of this because it's going to create a mechanism for you to follow up with people and to track who's listening through your entire podcast. And so for me, the Grow Your Life podcast, I also did Grow Your Life as my hashtag. So I got that idea from Ed Milet. Ed Milet is one of my favorite podcasts, and at the end of his podcast, he does a giveaway. It's called the 2-minute drill, and he only mentions it at the end of his podcast. And so he tells people to use hashtag #MaxOut on his social media to win either apparel, coaching, books, whatever he can offer that week to people, and a giveaway. And so I'm going to get to that here in a sec of why you need to tie in a hashtag to your podcast. So, but in my titles, what I'll do is I'll do episode number. So the format that we'll do episode number with a colon. Then we have our title. And then we use a dash, and then I put the hashtag. And that's the format of all of my podcast titles. And then when I put my name of who is doing the podcast, I actually put my full name, Jeremiah Krakowski, dash, or no, I put a / hashtag Grow Your Life. So that way people can actually search for my podcast by the full title, Grow Your Life. They can search for my name, Jeremiah Krakowski, and they can search for the hashtag. So people can find me on Apple iTunes, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, just by looking up the hashtag or the title or my name. So all of those are encompassed in that. And then what I did was this. I start by, once I knew what I wanted to talk about, what my audience resonates with, what I was hearing people asking from me, and also thinking about what I wanted to share with people. I want to start by saying this. Your first couple of episodes are probably not going to be your best. My first couple of episodes actually were not my best, but they came out pretty good. And so give yourself some grace to realize that you're not going to be perfect initially when you're starting out. But you're going to grow with this. You're going to get better over time. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And so from there, it's time to take action. We write down, okay, well, what are we going to talk about? Just start with episode number 1. You don't need to have all 3 picked out. Just start with the first episode. What do you want to talk about? And then record yourself. Either record the audio, record the video. What I use for video personally, to use my camera and the microphone together, is a resource called OBS. OBS, it's free. It stands for Open Broadcast Solution. It also allows me to capture screen sharing. If you're on a Mac, you can use QuickTime. You might be able to use iMovie as well. And ScreenFlow is really good, or TechSmith Camtasia. So you could also check out Camtasia, ScreenFlow, QuickTime, which is on every Mac, or iMovie. But OBS is a free solution on a computer that lets you record from screens, cameras, microphones, and it puts them all together at once. And then what I do is you don't have to do this, but I would recommend it. This is why Anchor is really cool, because you can add your intro, you can add maybe music to it. I believe they let you do that on their platform. They let you add certain stuff to it. I'm not positive on that. Let me look that up. Episode Builder. Yeah, they have editing tools. They have so they let you add transitions, background music, all of that. And you can even add music from Apple or Spotify if it's playable in Anchor only, is what it looks like. So they'll even transcribe it. So yeah, from there you can add those things. So what I did was I took my graphic from Canva, and my experience is in professional video editing. And so I haven't broken down all my favorite editing tools and how to edit video for you guys yet. But there's a couple free resources out there that you can use if you want to either just edit audio or do video. You can either use iMovie on a Mac. So you can use iMovie to edit video. If it's just audio, there's a free program called Audacity. Or what I really like is the Adobe Creative Cloud. Adobe Creative Cloud, you go to adobe.com. For businesses, I think it's $60 a month, and they give you access to Photoshop, Premiere, Adobe Audition, all of that. That's the more professional solution right there, and that's how I create mine. I add my titles and my music and all of that in there that way. A resource to get royalty-free music is audiojungle.com. And you can buy individual songs, find one that fits the mood of your podcast. That's how I found my music, the intro music. Some people, if you're doing more of a storytelling type of a podcast, music is definitely, throughout the whole thing, background music is good. If you could maybe find somebody either to write you an original music or just a low pad that you could loop through it. I've listened to some that are more teaching, and I think music gets annoying. But at the same time, it also costs money to have music throughout, so you don't have to have that. I notice a lot of people, they will prevent themselves from doing their podcast because they don't know how to use iMovie. They don't know how to use Audacity. They don't know how to use Audio Jungle. They don't have the resources to pay for music. And so I don't want any of this to prevent you from getting started. I don't want any of that to prevent you from getting started and growing and learning. Podcasting is really still at its infancy stage. It's now gone mainstream to where everybody is wanting to have a podcast, just like everybody was blogging. And so now I believe that podcasting is as important as having a website and blogging for people. And you need to get into this now, or not this, but you need to get into podcasting and recording and distilling your thoughts down. And so I want to encourage you, don't let the technical side of things overwhelm you and stop you from getting started. If that's the only thing stopping you, that comes out of a fear of worrying of making a mistake and doing it wrong and being embarrassed and worried what people would think. You need to get started doing something. If you have a desire to do a podcast, it means that you're supposed to, and you need to get started doing that. I know some people, they'll just go live on their Facebook and then download that video and upload it to YouTube and to the podcasting platforms, the audio. You can extract the audio from the video in that. So what I do personally is I take my cover art from Canva. I have my music in the intro. I have my little short intro, and then I have the music fade out once I start introducing what the podcast is. And I fade up from the title if you've watched my YouTube version. And then it's just straight me talking throughout the whole thing. And then at the end, I close it out. I have the same music, and then I have my little hashtag giveaway, which you'll hear me do at the end of this podcast. So the idea is I reference my hashtag. If people go to my Instagram, they can win a giveaway every single week on there. And so in that allows me to then track who's listening to the end of my podcast, who's listened to the end of it, because I only mention that hashtag giveaway at the very end of the podcast. And then people, they can win an opportunity to have me coach them. I'm not doing any sort of coaching right now except for the giveaway coaching because of my limited time and what I'm working on right now. That might change in the future. So for you who are starting your podcast, you're wanting to get started. Once you have your what, it's time to take action. So it's time to decide on a name. You need at least cover art. And your cover art could be as simple as just a color background with text. It could just be a title, a simple title, and then, with whatever your name is. If it's an interview style, if it's, another podcast I started listening to was Crime Junkies. And theirs, is where they talk about, they share these stories of different true crime, and they have music in the background and they break it down. And they actually, another part of podcasting is if you're not really good talking all at once, is you could record part of it, you could edit it, you could cut it down, you could distill it to where you record part of it, maybe you cut out a portion and you add in a portion, and Anchor lets you do that. They let you record and edit and do that very easily. So that's why I really think for most people, starting with Anchor, and then if you can either find somebody to hire to do this more technical stuff, or how to, knock yourself out with that. But don't let the fact of not having the knowledge and skill or resources to either buy royalty-free music prevent you from getting started. And so in that, I want to encourage you that once you know what you're going to talk about, you come up with a topic for your first episode, start recording it. And realize that if it didn't come out good, you can actually delete it and get rid of it. One of my very first early episodes, I actually deleted the entire podcast, episode number 3, and re-recorded it. I didn't like how it came out. It came out terrible. It was one of the worst teachings I've ever done. And so I deleted it, I got rid of it, and I re-recorded that episode from scratch, and realized that you have permission to do that. You can start recording, and nobody has to know about it, till you launch it. And so then in that, once you have that recorded, if it's on video, we can upload that video, we can extract the audio, and then we start to add that music. If you don't want to do video, you can, and please don't feel like you have to do video. I don't want that to be a limitation for people to have to stop. The biggest thing is you have all the resources you need to start a podcast in your pocket. And I want you guys to realize that you can go as big or as small as you want on this. The impact that doing the technical stuff has, here's the truth. The impact that all the super technical hard stuff has on the overall big picture of your long-term podcast is minuscule to the stress that it might cause you and prevent you from doing it. It's worse to not get started than to worry about all the technical stuff. You can figure that stuff out later. You can improve your podcast. Your later episodes are going to be better than your early ones. Okay? And so the first step is is to just get started. And so if you know who you want to interview, start reaching out to people, start asking them to do that. I've not really done an interview format, so I can't really speak into that. There's other people that do that. I know Jenna Kutcher and Pat Flynn. They have great resources on podcasting that you can learn from them as well, about doing the interview style, about finding people to interview. You know, a lot of people call this the Dream 100 as well. You know, who are some joint ventures, affiliates, stuff like that. What's it? Dana Derrick, I think is his name, came up with that model. And you know, maybe you're writing down who your dream 50 or 100 people that you would like to interview are. They don't have to be people like Zuckerberg or that. It could even be, I actually want to do an interview with my father-in-law. We were going to do that, but then I got sick, and so I didn't record that when he was here. But so I have a list of people that I want to start interviewing in the future on my podcast as I'm growing and doing that. But I knew I was supposed to get started just by talking directly. And so I want to encourage you that there's no really right or wrong way to do a podcast. The right podcast is the one that works for you, that you can be the best at, and that you can put out there and help people with, and that people want to listen to. Your goal is to serve people with your content, to create a resource, to create something that people want to listen to. It's like a TV show, it's like a radio show, but it's part of this new social economy, this digital economy of the internet, of doing this. And so using apps like Anchor or like Podbean or like Squarespace, you know, I broke down in my Squarespace course how to use Squarespace to host your podcast, and that's in there as well. That's what I use for mine, is that. Now the next thing is, once you record your first episode and your first piece of content, you know, whatever that is, whatever that first episode is, whatever those first 5 episodes are, you want to write a short description. It's usually 1 sentence. So 1 sentence about it. And that's your short description. And then you can write a couple more sentences after that. And this is your long description. So every podcast has what's called a short and a long description to it. And Apple kind of created this format for podcasting, and then every other platform bases it off of the Apple format. So a short description is like 1 sentence. It's like a very short. You also want people to know what your podcast is about just by the title. You don't want your title to be confusing to people. One thing that I didn't know is you can actually change your titles later on most platforms except for Stitcher, I think, which is okay. But I forgot to add my hashtag to all my titles, and I had episode 1 at the beginning. So I changed them to where it was just the number 1, and it changed it across all platforms. The way podcasting works is it generates what's called an RSS feed. And an RSS feed is a technical, it's written in XML, that tells the podcast engines where to find your audio file, what your description is, what your title is, what your name is. And another thing is also sometimes you have to look up the length of your podcast in Squarespace. You have to write down the length of it, and then that generates the RSS feed. And then you either manually go submit it to these platforms. So the ones that I submitted mine to initially, and we might submit to more, are these top 4. I did Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google. So the Google Play. So that pretty much covers all. And then I think I did TuneIn as well. And then I also have this video version on YouTube. So in that, people can access my podcast on those platforms. And so then when I tell people to go listen to my podcast, I just say, go look up Grow Your Life on your favorite podcast platform. Because a lot of people have a platform that they like to use more. I prefer using Spotify. I'm Windows and Android on everything. My wife is Apple. And so, but if you click and check out my podcast on either of those platforms, you'll find it on either of them easily. You'll be able to see the short and long description that I'm talking about. Each episode has that description. And then I have an episode using Squarespace. I have an episode website that people can click to. They can watch, they can access the YouTube version on there. They can also access extra resources. That's one of the number one reasons why I suggest using Squarespace or using a website or a blog to also disseminate your content. You can also use SoundCloud. That's another resource I didn't talk about. SoundCloud is another one for hosting. Having a website is where you can have additional resources, additional links, additional places where people can maybe access other blog posts that you've done. They could access resources that you're selling, sponsorships, referrals. And like I said, this is just an introduction to that. There's other people that can teach you how to get sponsorships, how to do that. I personally don't plan on doing sponsorships on my podcast. What I would rather do is create my own products and courses and services to people, and then I'm self-sponsoring my podcast. So the idea is my podcast is supporting all the resources that I have for sale on my website. And if you don't know how to build a website, I have a course. It's supposed to launch like a month and a half ago, and a lot of stuff's come up. It's coming out. Website Building Made Easy, on how to build a professional website, how to launch a podcast using Squarespace, and how to get that up in less than 7 days. And so that's a course that I have that's coming out here. It should be on my website here in the next week for you guys. So it'll be under courses there as start to finish how to do that. And I distilled that down to a resource. If you want a discount coupon for that, I can, just for listening to this, I can let you get that course for $197. So write me, and I'll give you a special link for that of how to get that course for $197. Just for listening all the way through this episode of this. I think that's going to really help you guys as well. And so, in that, once you know what you're going to talk about, your description. If you have a website built, I do suggest having a website built when you're launching your podcast, and that's why I suggested that course that's coming out. In that, you'll have your audio recording. If you did video, we'll try to edit it. There's also an app called KindMaster. KindMaster is KINEMASTER, and you can edit video with that, and then you can put it on YouTube. We can extract the audio from it. There's a lot of resources to extract audio from YouTube videos. You can just Google it, extracting audio from YouTube, on how to do that. One of the easiest ways is using a free program called Audacity. And then you have to install the MP3 plugin for Audacity. Or iMovie also lets you export audio, I believe, just by itself. And I think KindMaster does as well. So KindMaster is a good app. It's like $5 a month on the smartphones. And so in that, once you have that recorded, you have your title, you have your artwork, you have your 1-sentence description and your long description. Now we can launch it through either Anchor, through Squarespace. If you do it through Squarespace, you're going to have to manually submit it to Apple, to Spotify, to Stitcher, to Google, to TuneIn, to YouTube, all of those. And so to do that, here's what I did was I looked up Apple Podcast Submit. Submit. So if you don't know how to submit it, I had to look up, Spotify podcast submit. So I added whatever platform plus podcast submit to my search field, and I found their process of submitting my RSS feed to that. And then the RSS feed gets generated by Squarespace. If you're using Anchor, again, I think it lets you submit it in there. So that's why I'm saying Anchor eliminates all of this technical jargon and makes it very simple for you. So if you just want to do it simply, use Anchor. If you want to go beyond that, you'll have to do pretty much everything manually, like I've described here. And then you can look up how to submit those. And then what you want to do is this. They've said that most people never get to episode number 7 of their podcast. or they stop at episode number 7 and they never make episode number 8. And so I want you to make at least making 8 episodes your goal. If you can break through and make 8 episodes, you'll be able to sustain the long haul of podcasting. You'll be able to get into a groove and know that. But it's probably going to take you about 2 months, 8 episodes to get there, to where you'll be consistently able to come up with what to make podcasts on. And you'll think about it. For me, I don't plan my podcast until right before I go to record it. So this morning I realized, everybody's been asking me about podcasting. I'm going to just make a podcast on podcasting. There we go. Last week it was about how to work smarter and not harder. And what I'll usually do is I'll record my episode. I have a specific day of the week. For me, I think Monday is a good day. Monday or Tuesday, where I am launching my podcast. So I make it go live on Monday or Tuesday in the morning. Monday or Tuesday. And but what I do is I try to record it. So today is Wednesday. So sometime between Monday and Tuesday gives me the opportunity to, anytime between Wednesday through Sunday, I take an hour to record my podcast. So that gives me a window of time to move my schedule around, to record it between Monday and Sunday, this long form podcast, and then I launch it on Monday or Tuesday of that week usually. And if I know that I'm not going to be around for a couple weeks, maybe I'll record a couple of them over the course of a couple weeks. Maybe I'll do 2 a week, and then save them in the hopper to put out there. And then I'll pre-write my description, I'll pre-write my title, I'll pre-edit it, I'll get it all prepared and ready to launch. And then it's important to stay consistent with launching on the same day to do that. There's other people I have seen where they've done a podcast every single day, and I've personally chosen to not do that for myself because I want to have people to go to my Facebook and my Instagram. So for me, what I have is I have supporting content. So I have seven 10-minute mini wake-up call is what I call it, the Grow Your Life wake-up call in the morning on my Instagram Live and my Facebook every single day, where I talk about a short topic. It's not a full podcast. I won't talk for more than 10 minutes. If I do, then I have to either edit it or I'll go for 20 minutes and split it up into 2, like I did today. And then in that, what I'll look for is, and this is what I talked about in episode number 6 of the podcast, I'll look at the comments that people are giving me, the feedback that I'm hearing, what people want to hear more of from me, as well as the messages I'm receiving. And then what I did was I launched a group, a Facebook group. And this Facebook group is the hashtag Grow Your Life Facebook group. And if you're not in it and you're listening to this, you need to join it. Click on the link on my Instagram on Linktree, or go to my website, click on the podcast. You'll see it says community. On my website at the top it says community, or you can look up hashtag Grow Your Life in Facebook and you'll find the community. It's the Grow Your Life podcast, the hashtag Grow Your Life community, and Grow Your Life podcast. And so what this is it's actually a safe place. It's a closed group where people can discuss what's taught in my podcast. They can discuss what they want to hear me teach in my future podcast episodes. We can discuss and disseminate the content of what I'm talking about on my 7-minute content. And it becomes this ecosystem to where I'm spending 10 minutes a day recording content, and then an hour once a week recording an episode. And then we have a community built around that of people that are discussing and growing and learning. So what I did was I built a podcast community around what I'm talking about. And it all encompasses, that's my free content that I'm putting out for people. So essentially, people are getting a collegiate level learning from me. It's a full academy from me for free that then leads into my paid courses, my coaching programs, my affiliate promotions, whatever I'm trying to promote, my blog posts. And we're disseminating that based on the feedback that we're getting from there. So what ends up happening with the group and then the social media is the people who are listening to your podcast, engaging with you, and it could just be your friends and family to start. But the people who are, who are engaging with you, and you can build a following. If you have a group, you can invite the people from your page to that group. They're able to engage with you and tell you what content they want you to make more podcasts on, based on the feedback that you hear from people. And if you can listen and you have empathy to hear what people's needs are, you'll know exactly what to make and to continue with your podcast. So your group, this is like the ultra level of how to make content. You actually don't have to work as hard to come up with what to say, because your group and your social media will tell you what to say. So it's like having a crystal ball saying, what do people want me to say? But they're actually just telling you in the group. And what I do is I invite everybody who's listening to my podcast, who's listening to my live videos, to tell me if there's any other topics you want me to teach. And I'm telling you this, if you're listening to this, let me know in my group, on my social media, in the comments on my blog, email me what you want me to teach about. Tell me, and I will make it. That's my commitment with this, is that I'm going to start making content of this. So you want to build a community around your listeners, and you can either do this for free. For me, doing it free makes more sense because I have a product I'm selling. If you're not selling a product up here, then what I recommend is a Patreon. And a Patreon is where you can have patrons that are listening, your podcast listeners. It's like a professional level to where, so you have your group, but then you can have a Patreon that's like a pro level to where maybe they get access a week early, or they get live recordings, or they get exclusive interviews with you. And then this is how you can start to monetize. You can start to monetize your podcast. You can start to have sponsors come in there and do giveaways. You can start to do stuff like that by then tying it with a group, with a Patreon. And that's how you can very simply and easily, with no experience ever, start a podcast that then starts to pay you money. And this is, I'm not going to go much further than the Patreon. You could also build a paid mentorship program, a monthly program that people, could grow with. So for instance, I have the Grow Your Life podcast, the Grow Your Life group. We could have I'm thinking of doing a paid Grow Your Life Accelerator, or a paid Grow Your Life. Could be Inner Circle. It could be a mentorship program that people pay anywhere from $10 to $100, maybe even $1,000 a month for, these higher levels of access. And so the idea is you're creating a foundation with your podcast of all the other stuff you're trying to do. If you're building a company that's a brick and mortar, you'll create supporting resources on what you're doing. If you're teaching content to people, if you're trying to create influence, if you're doing like spiritual content, this is why, whatever that is for you. The very first thing that I started this podcast with was start listening to podcasts. Start listening to more podcasts. Find your groove. Find your resource. Then start doing those Facebook Live videos. Listen to podcast episode number 6. Learn what content people want to hear from you. And in that, you might be listening to this now and you're like, well, I don't know how I can tie a podcast to my government consulting business, or my flooring business, or my whatever it is that you do, or my nutritional company, or my network marketing company. That's what episode number 6 talks about of this podcast, the Grow Your Life podcast, episode number 6, where I talked about video content creation and video marketing. That's going to help you know what to talk about and what to build a podcast around. And I talked about that for a whole hour. I broke it down of how to come up with what people want to hear from you. And then you can roll that information into a group, into these live videos, into podcast episodes, into maybe a paid program, into courses, training, mentorship, consulting, products, manufacturing, software, referrals, affiliates, direct sales, which, by the way, MLM and direct sales is affiliate marketing. E-commerce is essentially affiliate marketing, direct sales, where you are acquiring the product first and then selling it back to people. And so in that, don't let the names of all this stuff get you tripped up because I didn't mention your exact name of what you do. I do want to hear from you. What are your businesses? What are you trying to do? Maybe where a hiccup is of what I've been teaching here, what I taught here, what maybe you didn't understand from this, where you're stuck in this process, and then I can help you. So leave those comments in my Grow Your Life community. You can find this, you can look up, you can search in the community. So go to the group. If you're listening to this now, go to the Grow Your Life group and search for podcast and podcasting, and you can find all the episodes. Then find the one where I did this, or just make a new post with, hey, I'm trying to make a podcast. This is my situation. This is my struggle. This is my challenge. And then I'll help you. Our community will help you. That's why that exists. This is an accelerator for free. What I've done is I basically distilled what a lot of people have had to pay thousands of dollars for into a free resource for people, because what I want to do is I want to go further. I want to completely max out and change this industry of information publishing, of teaching, of disseminating content, of helping people learn how to grow as an influencer and influence and leveraging influencers. What I've done over the last 15 years is I've worked with specifically in my job career, 2 big influencers, helping elevate them to heights of books, speaking, writing, stuff like that. And so that's what I've worked with in doing that. And so then what I'm doing is I'm distilling kind of how I did that for people, the formula, while also then elevating myself as an influencer in that space. So that's kind of my goal behind all of this. And that's what I want to teach you how to do, is how to grow in your influence, grow in your reach, grow in your territory, grow your life, grow in your business. And by doing that, for many of you, it's about launching a podcast. And so you might need to also re-listen through this and re-watch it, and maybe watch the YouTube version where I have the whiteboard behind me and I'm writing all this on the whiteboard, and it'll help you go through this process. And so once you launch your podcast, once you make your artwork, once you maybe launch it on Anchor, once you got it on all those platforms, you got your description written, your titles, now you got to stay consistent with it. And this is where consistency comes in. It's what I call the magic pill for success, consistency. I did an entire podcast episode on consistency. Darren Hardy calls it the compound effect. The compound effect is small actions done repeatedly over time create big results. And that's episode number 8 of the podcast. When you combine an idea with action, and then you combine consistency with that action, impossible things become possible for everyday people. And so I want to encourage you, once you do those episodes, make your goal getting to 8 episodes. Make it consistent. Consistently launching it on Mondays. And then as you start to, if you have resources, you can hire people to help you with some of this process. Start to develop ways to monetize it. Figure that out. I highly recommend having a group, doing live videos on your social media. That way then people will start to tell you what to teach more of. And you'll start to get into a groove, a consistent groove of what you need to do, how to build that foundation, how to grow a podcast that lasts the long haul, that goes the long haul, that goes a long way. And so in this is you're creating your own. If you're doing video, it's like your own TV show, your own radio show, and you're teaching people, and it's a resource that people can rely on and come back to you for information. And you're starting to then build trust with people so that then when you're ready to sell them on something that's bigger. I mean, that's my whole goal with this. My goal is that if you're listening to this podcast, you've gotten to this place that when it comes time for me to sell a resource that I believe will help you, that you'll buy it from me because you trust me. You know that I'm here to help you. You know that I'm I'm not just in this just to make money. I want to help a lot of people, and I don't really care if they buy from me or not. I just want to help people. But I also got to pay the bills. And so when I produce high value materials for you, I'm going to put a price tag on it and sell it unashamedly to people. And the ones that are the right customers for that are going to buy it. And that's what I know through my experience of doing this. And my goal is to teach you how to get to that place as well. Get to that place to where you can sell your products, sell your resources with confidence and know what people want to hear from you, how to talk, how to disseminate, how to influence, and how to grow your life, expand your territory, expand your reach through the resources of the internet, marketing, podcasting, talking, the words you say. And here's a little clue right here. As you start podcasting, as you start making this content, you're going to start to see what people really want to hear from you. And that might even lead into a book. I've never personally written a book before. I write blog posts. I write very long descriptions to my social media content. But I know that writing a book is in my future. And I'm starting to find what people want me to write a book on. By doing this process. And this is some of the first steps in that. Growing as an influencer and growing your life is doing that, is starting with building a podcast. So go through this, all the steps, get your podcast launched, and you're gonna open up a door and a window of possibilities for you that never existed previously. And for those of you that have gotten to the end of the podcast here, I want to tell you about the hashtag Grow Your Life giveaway every single week on my Instagram. If you post in the comments of my posts on my Instagram feed, not on my Instagram live videos, but on my Instagram feed, hashtag Grow Your Life as a comment within the first 10 minutes of me posting on the Instagram feed, I will pick one person every single week for a giveaway. And right now I'm giving away 30-minute coaching sessions on the phone. It might change in the future. And we're doing that every single week. You can win once per month. And it's a random giveaway where I'm picking one person who leaves hashtag Grow Your Life on my post within the first 10 minutes every single week to win that giveaway. And that's what I recommend you also do with a hashtag. And is at the end of your podcast, tell people to do the exact same thing I just said right now. To go to your Instagram, to leave hashtag, whatever your hashtag is, on your posts, and they'll win a giveaway. And it could be a product. It could be something you're going to ship to them. It could be minutes of your time. It could be apparel, something. It could be anything. It could be even just a gift card, something like that. But doing that, adding that little hashtag giveaway to the end is a really, really great way to connect people and to track who your most engaged people are, the people who are listening to the end of your podcast. So add that to your process, doing the hashtag giveaway. And you can win my giveaway by going to my Instagram. Every single week, we do a giveaway. Hashtag Grow Your Life. I told you what that was, and you can win that. So I believe in you guys. I know you can do this. I know you can accomplish great things if you make decisions, take actions, and stay consistent with it. Your life will change, and you can grow your life. So I hope this blessed you. If this has, share this with somebody. Share this with even, friends, family, competitors, whatever. Somebody's like, I don't know how to start a podcast. Recommend them listen to this, If any of my podcast episodes have influenced you, share it with somebody. And I also recommend that when you make your podcast, tell people to share it with people. If this episode has impacted you, share my podcast with people. And you'll see expansion of your territory, your influence, just by sharing this with people in that. So grow your life, everybody, and we'll talk soon.